Our cow just had a calf, but there's a twist. We had no idea she was pregnant. How did we not know that our cow was pregnant? Well, we're going to share that closer to the end of the video, because what we're going to talk about right now is what happens if you keep milking a cow past the point that you should be either drying her off or continuing to milk her past rebreeding her. Before we go any further, we really have to talk about the general practices for dairy animals, what it means to get them bred, to get them into milk, and to continue milking. The general practice for a milk-producing cow is to rebreed her 2 months after she has a calf. The reason why you do this is because it keeps her in her proper rhythm and proper cycle for getting rebred easily and producing milk continually. And when I say continually, I mean for the longevity of her life, not continually like milking and then perpetually milking, because what you need to do for the common practice is to dry her off 2 months before she calves again. And just in case you're very new to this, a dry off period for a cow is 2 months before she calves. You completely stop her from producing milk. But what happens if you don't follow those common practices? What if you keep milking without breeding her? Or what if you keep milking her during that 2-month dry off period? Well, these are the questions that we're here to answer today, and that directly relate to the story in which happened to me with my new calf. Let's first start with the risks of extended milking without rebreeding. Every mammal has a lactation cycle. That is, when the baby is first born, the milk production is at a limited capacity, which then gains over time. With a cow, it's about 4 to 8 weeks. And as it gains over time, it reaches its max capacity, which is its peak production. Once peak production is hit, a few weeks later, milk production is going to start to slowly dwindle. Every mammal will be different, and every animal within its own species will be slightly different also, because, well, all animals in their own species will produce milk at different rates. And when it comes to a cow or goats, milk production may hit a constant level, meaning that you could probably keep milking and never even really notice too much of a decline. And it's at this point that goats and cows actually are different. Goats can have an extended calving or kidding time where they can be milked out 2 to 3 years. And I actually have done that with a goat one time because she had trouble getting bred and she didn't want to dry off. So I've actually had experience milking a goat for 3 years without any problems, and everything was fine. This can happen with goats, but with cows, it can be a lot different. But if allowed to continue milk production without being rebred and to still continue providing milk without ever drying off, there are many different problems that can arise out of your cow. The first thing to note is that the amount of milk she produces is going to be significantly lower than her peak performance. She may level off, but continuing to milk her, even though she's leveled off in her milk production, can lead to some dire effects. One of those effects, especially reaching past that year point, is that it may be harder to get her pregnant again. There's a few different factors that keep a cow from getting pregnant if she has prolonged milking or even extending breeding between breedings. One of those things is that she can start to gain cysts in her ovaries. With those cysts in her ovaries, this can actually lead to a difficulty in her getting pregnant. But a cow through extended milking will also see hormonal imbalances, have a hard time going back into her heat cycles, and even accepting pregnancies, because a lot of these hormonal imbalances keep the pregnancy from taking. But calving isn't the only issue. With that extended stress on a cow's udders, you'll start to see a lot more problems with mastitis, and reoccurring mastitis at that. Now, not only does a cow's milk production dwindle over time, but she also has the potential to forcefully dry herself off. When this happens, she can make her milk taste terrible and also start to withhold milk, essentially forcing you to dry her off. Now, your loss of milk isn't just the problem here, but it's also that a cow is much more likely to get pregnant when she's in milk. So not only are you losing this milk production, but you're also adding another level of her having trouble getting pregnant again. But let's say the cow is bred and she's continued to milk past that 2-month dry off period all the way up until calving. There's so much strain on a cow's body when producing milk that a lot of that nutrients is lost going to baby in utero at those last crucial times of their lives. And this is one huge reason why the dry off period is so crucial for the baby inside of utero at those last moments. But it's not just the growth of the baby in utero, it's also the preparation for the baby calf once she comes out. Like we talked about before, all mammals have a lactation cycle. And the beginning of that lactation cycle, all mammals first produce colostrum. Colostrum isn't just one of the most important things for a mammal to eat once born, it's specifically important for a calf. Not to go too deep into this, but mammals have different placenta types. For example, in a primate, 100% of the immunities are passed from mother to baby inside of the womb through the placenta. But a cow, pig, horse, or any other ruminant, 0% of the immunities from the mother make it through the placenta wall and actually into the baby. All the immunities needed come through the colostrum itself. Not through the mother, not in utero, but from the colostrum. So if a cow is continued to be milked all the way up until birth, her cycle isn't allowed to be reset and that colostrum level doesn't come in enough, or if at all. And this could lead to dire effects for the baby and the health of the baby its entire life. Specifically because within those first 24 hours of life, the baby needs, through the colostrum, its proper amount of IgG immunotransfer. And if the calf doesn't get its proper IgG immunities, then you're likely to see a sick cow or sick calf, or easy to get sick cow or easy to get sick calf its entire life. Now there are some signs that mimic late lactation milking without breeding. Some of the signs of late pregnancy milking can also mimic late lactation milking. For one of those is a significant and sudden loss in milk production. This is because the mother is starting to hold back her milk and hold back her production, really preparing for the birth of her baby. And in those last 2 months, you can also see an increase of mastitis. And that's because the mom is working so hard on creating a baby and creating a milk that she's having a hard time fighting off illnesses or pathogens or whatever is getting inside of her udder, creating that mastitis. But also her milk will start to become chunky, and you may mistake that for being mastitis. And that's because she's trying to start her cycle over and her mammary glands have not been reset. She's trying to hold back some cream and she's trying to create this colostrum, which is causing a lot of problems inside of her udder. This also doesn't allow for her mammary glands to be reset or heal up. And she can also have so many issues postpartum when it comes to her own specific health. So we could see things more like milk fever or even ketosis because her body hasn't had time to reset and recalibrate, and so much went to creating milk and baby at the same time that once the baby comes out, there's a lot of health problems that can arise. Now, how did we not know that our cow was actually pregnant? To really understand how we didn't know she was pregnant, we have to go back to the beginning of when we bought her. Oh, she is not our first cow. So some of the signs of pregnancy we may have known. But the problem that we had is that the couple that we bought them from had tried to get this cow pregnant for many different months. They tried with AI twice, and both times they were supposedly confirmed failures. When we went to pick her up, she even had a heat tape patch on the back of her tail, which is something that helps track a heat cycle of a cow. Because there was a confirmed false pregnancy test, so she wasn't pregnant from both of those AI attempts, the couple decided to get rid of her. So she would have been late in her lactation cycle without giving birth. Like we talked about earlier, this could be a problem. So we started to see many different signs of late lactation cycle milking. She started to dry herself off, started to have reoccurring mastitis, and that mastitis started to jump from quarter to quarter, which is something that we really were dealing with. And we had really a lot of trouble tracking her cycles. Obviously now, because she was pregnant, we know that. And she started drying herself off and her milk started to taste really terrible. A lot like those signs that I told you of her trying to forcefully dry herself off. We did start to see some weight gain in our cow, but we attributed this to a change in feed because With milk cows, their weight condition can go up and down frequently if they're in milk, and that varies heavily based off of feed. So we assume that since we were feeding her different and the quality of feed was higher, she just put on more weight and her condition was better. The idea of her being pregnant was so out of left field for us because the entire time we had been operating under the false guidance of the AI tech or vet that had checked our cow from the previous owners. And we put so much faith in that decision that we weren't even a part of, that it was just so far out of our minds that this cow was actually pregnant, that we misinterpreted a lot of these signs as late lactation milking instead of late term pregnancy milking problems. For the 2 months that we had her before she calved, we had been really trying to figure out her cycle and trying to get her rebred, but getting her rebred without knowing her cycle is pretty difficult. So we needed to first track her cycle, then set up for having a bull to come over to get her impregnated, because AI didn't take for those 2 times, so maybe she had a problem. So we were scheduling for a bull to come over and help full coverage that way, instead of having an AI tech and putting straws inside of her. Without getting too graphic, we started to notice and get really concerned because there was a lot of discharge coming outside of her back end. And we somewhat attributed this to finally being able to hone in on her cycle, which we had a lot of trouble figuring out before. In retrospect, we totally know why, but these are a lot of the signs that we were actually super worried about and couldn't figure out. Honestly, this brought a lot of panic and a lot of stress because we just brought on a new cow who was in milk, who was supposed to provide us with milk and our family with milk, and we were going to get her pregnant. Even though we knew that she was later in lactation cycle, we thought that we could get her pregnant and then reset that cycle. But we were having obviously issues that it was a very stressful time. Well, the issues that we were having really started to rear themselves one morning when our cow was down. She didn't want to get up. We assumed that she had mastitis, and we were really trying to milk that mastitis out of her. We tested through a CMT test, and we even brought her milk into a local lab to test it to make sure that there was nothing inside of it because we were having so many problems. It was that morning that we got her up. She had bloody mucousy discharge. We assumed that this was the end of her cycle, but my wife that morning said, what if we have been misinterpreting this the whole time? She's been pregnant the whole time. In my mind, I was thinking, there's no way she's pregnant. They confirmed it 2 to 3 times. They had heat tape on the back of her. They were trying to track her cycle. There's no way that they missed it, and we've had a pregnant cow this whole time. So I quickly dispelled those fears and moved on with our day, milked her out. Then 15 minutes later, I'm down here riding a quad around, and I look right here, right where I'm standing, and I see in this little foresty area, our cow licking what I thought was a feed bag. But as I inspect this feed bag and I look more carefully, I think to myself, we don't have any feed bags that are that color. So I walk in, inspect a little bit further. And what do I see? There on the floor, a little baby calf that the mom is licking up because it was just born. Without hesitation, I run up to the house, scream inside of the door, we have a baby calf, we have a baby calf. My wife exclaims, what are you talking about? I assure her again, there is a baby calf on the floor. We had been so stressed prior to this that the relief of this knowledge that came to my wife's ears brought her to collapsing on the floor out of astonishment and relief. For one, that we have a baby. For two, we know what the problems are and they have been easily rectified. But since we didn't know that she was pregnant this whole time, we needed to act fast because we knew that she wasn't going to be properly reset in her cycle, in her milk cycle, so that the colostrum didn't come in. So we luckily have some friends out here. We ran over to their house, we got some frozen colostrum from them, ran back home, got it set up, fed it to the baby, and she's doing great and awesome. And we decided to name her Celestine, which is Latin for heavenly, because she truly is a heavenly gift. Because I didn't know the actual state of pregnancy of my cow, There were many signs that were showing themselves as one thing when they were another. For example, I thought that she was having lactation dry off period, and she was forcing herself to dry off milk, which would have made it harder for me to get her pregnant when I had scheduled a bull to come over 2 weeks after she was forcefully drying herself off. But really, she was pregnant the whole time. There are so many different surprises that happen on a farm. So hopefully you learned something through this, and you learned the importance of why we continually breed a cow, why we dry her off before she calves, and the importance of just really knowing your animals and paying a lot of attention to them. If you've experienced something like this before, let me know down in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Imagine if we didn't notice and we just come down here and see this little heifer calf.